It was a sunny morning at Mar-a-Lago when Donald Trump made a decision that would alter the course of his presidency forever. Flipping through the TV channels, he caught a report on Ibrahim Traoré's rising influence in global politics. "This African kid is getting too much attention," Trump grumbled to his staff. "We need to show him who's really in charge of the world." His press secretary, Sarah Mitchell, cautioned, "Mr. President, Traoré has been very sharp in international debates." "Sharp?" Trump scoffed, waving her off. "He's barely out of his 30s. I was closing international deals when he was still in school. I'm going to show him the difference between a real leader and a lucky kid." Trump picked up the phone and called the producers at Fox News. "I want a live debate with Ibrahim Traoré. 1 hour, unedited, broadcast worldwide. I'm going to teach this guy how real politics works." Sean Hannity, the host, tried to warn him. "Mr. President, Traoré has a reputation for being incredibly well-spoken." "Sean, I'm Donald Trump," the president interrupted. "I've built an empire, won the presidency twice, and negotiated with world leaders for decades. A kid from a country nobody's heard of is no match for me." Within hours, an official invitation was sent. Trump was so confident he didn't even bother requesting a briefing on Traoré, a grave error that would prove costly. In Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré received the invitation with a mix of surprise and caution. "Dr. Konate," he said to his foreign minister, "Trump is seriously underestimating me. Men like him see Africa as inferior by default. Will you accept the invitation, President?" Dr. Konate asked. "Of course," Traoré replied, a faint smile crossing his face. "This will be an educational moment for him and for the world. Prepare a full dossier on Trump. If he wants to test competence, we'll give him exactly what he's asking for." While Trump spent his weekends golfing at Mar-a-Lago, certain of an easy victory, Ibrahim Traoré immersed himself in preparation at the presidential palace in Ouagadougou. His team worked tirelessly, analyzing every facet of Trump's presidency. "I want everything," Traoré instructed. "Domestic policies, foreign relations, economic decisions, his successes, his failures, and especially his contradictions." Dr. Moussa Diallo, leading the research on Trump's African policies, reported, "President, he slashed foreign aid to Africa by 67%, canceled critical health programs, yet boosted arms sales to authoritarian regimes." Aminata Ouedraogo, the economy minister, added, "Trump promised to protect American jobs, but his trade deficit ballooned by $200 billion. His rhetoric doesn't align with the results." Meanwhile, in Washington, Trump brushed off his staff's attempts to brief him. "I don't need to study some African kid," he said dismissively. "I'll rely on my charm and natural experience. Plus, the audience will be American. They'll back their president." His aides pressed further. "Mr. President, at least review his African policies." "My Africa policy is simple," Trump snapped. "America first. We don't waste money on countries that can't help us in return." Sean Hannity, concerned about his show's reputation, made one last attempt. "Mr. President, Traoré has a master's from the Sorbonne and an MBA from the London School of Economics." "Sean, are you nervous?" Trump chuckled. "I have an MBA from Wharton, and more importantly, I have real-world experience building businesses, not just reading books." Trump's overconfidence was about to crash headlong into Traoré's meticulous preparation. The contrast couldn't be starker. An American president banking on instinctive bravado against a young African leader armed with razor-sharp facts. The evening of the debate arrived, drawing unprecedented global anticipation. Fox News had transformed its studio into a grand stage, with 89 countries broadcasting the event live. Trump strode in, waving to the cameras as if at a campaign rally. Across the world, Traoré stood calmly in his presidential office, exuding quiet confidence. "Good evening, America and the world," Sean Hannity began. "Tonight, we present a historic showdown between President Donald Trump and President Ibrahim Traoré on global leadership in the 21st century." The screen split, showing Trump in the opulent Fox News studio and Traoré in the elegant yet understated setting of his office. President Trump, Hannity continued, "You requested this debate. What is your message to President Traoré?" Trump leaned forward, a smug grin on his face. "Traoré, I respect your ambition, but real leadership demands experience you just don't have. I built a billion-dollar empire, led the world's largest economy, and, with all due respect," he added, his tone dripping with condescension, "Burkina Faso isn't exactly a global powerhouse. America leads for a reason. We have the experience, resources, and power that smaller nations simply can't match." Traoré smiled politely. "President Trump, thank you for your words, but allow me to correct a few inaccuracies. On building empires, I inherited a nation ravaged by decades of mismanagement. In 3 years, we transformed the economy, reduced poverty by 34%, and established universal health care. You inherited a thriving economy and left a deficit of $7.8 trillion. Perhaps we should discuss who truly builds versus who destroys." Trump's face reddened, his irritation visible. "That's fake news. My economy was the best in history. Data from your own Federal Reserve says otherwise," Traoré replied calmly. "But I'm not here to dwell on the past. I'm here to discuss effective leadership." Hannity sensed the debate was veering off Trump's script. The president, realizing Traoré wouldn't be easily rattled, shifted to a more aggressive tactic. "Traoré, you're young, so let me teach you something about real politics. Leadership is about strength, about making deals that put your country first. America first worked because I prioritized American interests. Burkina Faso should focus on its own problems instead of trying to play on the global stage." Traoré paused, his patient smile infuriating Trump further. "President Trump, an interesting perspective. Let's examine the results of your America First policy." Graphs appeared on the screen, prepared by Traoré's team. During your previous term, America lost influence in 67 countries. Your trade deficit grew by $200 billion, and cooperation with traditional allies dropped by 45%. Meanwhile, my Burkina Faso First policy strengthened ties with our neighbors, boosted regional trade by 340%, and made our nation a respected mediator. Trump interrupted, his voice rising. "Those numbers are fake news. My presidency was the greatest success story in American history." "President Trump," Traoré said evenly, "these figures come from your own government, Federal Reserve, Department of Commerce, Pentagon. I can provide the sources. More importantly, leadership isn't just about benefiting your own country. It's about inspiring others, building bridges, resolving conflicts. How many international conflicts have you resolved? And how many have you created?" Trump, now visibly flustered, stammered, "I resolved plenty of conflicts, made historic peace deals." "Which ones specifically survived your presidency?" Traoré pressed, his tone calm but piercing. "And how many new conflicts arose from your unilateral decisions?" Hannity, sensing Trump's struggle, tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, but the damage was done. Traoré had dismantled Trump's narrative with precision, using undeniable data. The young African leader was giving the American president a lesson he hadn't anticipated. Trump, realizing he was losing ground, shifted to a more personal attack, his voice thick with frustration. "Traoré, let's be real here. You came to power through a military takeover. How can you lecture anyone about democratic leadership?" Traoré smiled, unruffled, as if he'd anticipated this exact move. "President Trump, that's a fascinating question, especially coming from someone who attempted to challenge a democratically decided election." The room fell silent. Traoré continued, his voice steady but firm. "We removed a corrupt regime that had lost all public trust. Since then, we've held 3 free elections with an 89% turnout. You, on the other hand, sought to disrupt the counting of legitimate votes. I acted to protect democracy, you acted to undermine it." Data flashed on the screen, stark and undeniable. Ibrahim Traoré's approval rating in Burkina Faso stood at 87%, while Trump's had never climbed above 49% during his presidency. Perhaps, Traoré added gently, the issue isn't how one assumes power, but what one does with it. Trump's face contorted with rage. That's a lie. The election was stolen, he shouted, slamming his hand on the desk. President Trump, Traoré responded, his tone unshaken. 60 American courts, including judges you appointed, rejected those claims. Even your own vice president upheld the election's legitimacy. Compare that to Burkina Faso, where we've built trust through transparent governance. Leadership isn't about clinging to power, it's about earning it. Sean Hannity, visibly uneasy, tried to intervene. Gentlemen, let's move to another topic, but Trump, now spiraling, cut him off. You don't understand the pressures of running a superpower, he bellowed, pointing at the camera. You're from a tiny country with no global weight. Traoré nodded, almost as if agreeing. You're right. I don't know what it's like to have America's resources. Yet, with a budget 50 times smaller, we've solved problems like healthcare access, infrastructure, and social inequality. Issues America still struggles with. Maybe it's not about resources, but competence. Hannity's discomfort was palpable. His guest was being systematically outmaneuvered on live television, and Trump's responses were growing erratic. Desperate to regain control, Trump leaned into a tactic that made the audience wince. Traoré, let's be honest. Africa has always had governance problems. You don't have the democratic tradition we have in America. Traoré's expression remained serene, but his eyes hardened. President Trump, thank you for revealing your true views on Africa. Let's talk about democratic traditions. South Africa transitioned peacefully from apartheid, while America still grapples with systemic racism centuries later. Ghana has maintained peaceful power transfers for decades, yet America had a president who refused to accept defeat. Global democracy indices rank 23 African nations above the United States in democratic quality. More data appeared on the screen, citing Freedom House and Transparency International, showing a decline in American democratic standards during Trump's tenure. But let's be clear, Traoré continued, his voice rising with quiet authority. You invited me here, thinking you could easily dismiss a young African leader. Instead, you're learning that some of us are prepared, unintimidated, and unafraid to challenge arrogance disguised as leadership. Trump was now visibly trembling with fury. I'm Donald Trump. I don't need lessons from some African kid. Clearly you do, Traoré replied, his calm cutting deeper than any shout. Because an African kid just gave you a masterclass in preparation, respect for facts, and dignified leadership. I came ready for a debate. You came expecting to bully your way through. Hannity, sweating, tried to restore order. Gentlemen, please, let's keep this civil. I've been civil, Traoré said, his voice steady. It's President Trump who resorted to personal attacks when his arguments crumbled. The world watched, stunned, as Trump unraveled. Standing abruptly, he gestured wildly. This is ridiculous. This kid is disrespecting the President of the United States. Ibrahim remained seated, hands folded, his expression one of quiet pity. President Trump, please sit down. You're embarrassing your nation on a global stage. I don't take orders from an African. Trump roared, pointing aggressively. America is the greatest country in the world. We won't be lectured by some third-world nobody. Your country isn't worth a single American state. Traoré sighed softly. President Trump, thank you for showing why America is losing global influence. World leaders don't want partners who scream when faced with facts. They want statesmen who debate with reason. Your behavior proves everything the world suspects. You lead with emotion, not wisdom. Trump, pacing the studio, was now incoherent. You Africans should be grateful for American aid. Aid you cut by 67%, Traoré countered calmly. Aid that often comes with strings, perpetuating dependency rather than fostering growth. You're proving my point, President Trump. I respond with data, you respond with shouting. That's why nations are turning away from America. not because they dislike Americans, but because they're tired of being treated as lesser by leaders who mistake volume for authority. The broadcast captured a devastating contrast: Traoré's composed authority versus Trump's public meltdown. Social media erupted. Hashtags like Trump meltdown and Traoré masterclass trended globally within minutes. "I've never seen an American president so thoroughly dismantled live," tweeted a Reuters journalist. Traoré is giving a lesson in dignity under pressure. CNN interrupted its regular programming to dissect the spectacle. "This is a defining moment for Trump's presidency," a pundit declared. "He underestimated a 37-year-old leader and is paying the price." In the Fox News control room, producers scrambled. "Cut to commercial," one shouted, but it was too late. The humiliation was beaming live to 89 countries. In capitals worldwide, leaders watched in shock. A French diplomat whispered to colleagues, "Trump is imploding on global television." A Chinese official noted, "This young African has exposed America's fragility." Back in the studio, Traoré delivered a final, piercing remark. "President Trump, you've shown the world the difference between leadership and performance. Real leaders stay composed, rely on facts, and build bridges. They don't burn them in a tantrum." Trump, red-faced, tried one last outburst. "You'll regret this." "America will." "America won't do anything," Traoré interrupted, his voice calm but firm, "because the world just saw the truth." "Thank you, President Trump, for giving me this platform to show that Africa produces leaders worthy of respect, not intimidation." Hannity, desperate, cut to commercial as Trump continued to rant. The screen faded to black, but the damage was done. A young African leader had exposed the American president's fragility in a way no one had before. In the hours that followed, shockwaves rippled through Washington and beyond. Senior Republicans began distancing themselves. "President Trump's conduct was unbecoming," said Senator James Thornton, choosing his words carefully. Democrats were less restrained. "Trump's tantrum disqualifies him from leadership," declared Congresswoman Elena Vasquez. "To be outclassed by a foreign leader and then collapse publicly is unforgivable." International media were merciless. "American president behaves like a spoiled child," headlined Le Monde. "Traoré shines as Trump crumbles," wrote The Guardian. The Dow Jones plummeted 800 points as investors questioned America's stability. "Markets hate unpredictability," a Goldman Sachs analyst explained. Trump's meltdown signals chaos. In Burkina Faso, crowds gathered in Ouagadougou, chanting, "Traoré has shown Africa's strength." Meanwhile, Traoré received a flood of invitations. From the European Union, China, even America's allies, eager to engage with a leader who had so deftly exposed Trump's weaknesses. At Mar-a-Lago, Trump secluded himself, refusing press interviews. Aides described him as furious and plotting retaliation, but his authority was fractured. The debate had shifted the global narrative, elevating Ibrahim Traoré as a symbol of dignity and exposing Trump as a leader undone by his own hubris. 6 months after the debate that stunned the world, the geopolitical landscape had transformed irreversibly. Donald Trump's political career never recovered from the public meltdown. The images of his red-faced outbursts, juxtaposed with Ibrahim Traoré's serene composure, became a defining moment, replayed endlessly across global media. In Washington, the pressure mounted. Senior Republicans, once loyal, began to abandon him. "President Trump's behavior has damaged our nation's standing," declared Senator Margaret Hensley, her tone measured but firm. "America deserves leadership that commands respect." Democrats seized the moment. "Trump's collapse under scrutiny proves he's unfit for office," said Senator Daniel Ortiz. "To be outmaneuvered by a young foreign leader and then throw a tantrum on live television is a disgrace." Impeachment proceedings loomed for the third time, with even some Republicans admitting privately that the Traoré debacle had broken their resolve to defend him. International outlets were unrelenting. "Trump's childish breakdown marks America's decline," editorialized Germany's Der Spiegel. Ibrahim Traoré, with poise and precision, exposed the fragility of American leadership, wrote India's The Hindu. The financial markets reflected the turmoil. The Dow Jones, already shaken by the debate, continued to slide, shedding another 400 points over the following weeks. Global investors are rattled, a Morgan Stanley analyst noted. Trump's instability is a liability for economic confidence. In Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré emerged as a global icon. Spontaneous celebrations erupted in Ouagadougou, with citizens chanting, "Our president showed the world Africa's dignity." International invitations poured in. The European Union requested a special address to its parliament. Japan extended an offer for a state visit. Even Canada, a steadfast American ally, sought a summit with the young leader who had so deftly upended the global narrative. Traoré, ever humble, accepted select invitations, prioritizing opportunities to advocate for African sovereignty and mutual respect in global affairs. At Mar-a-Lago, Trump remained isolated, his rage palpable. Aides reported he spent hours watching debate reruns, muttering about fake news and vowing revenge. "He's obsessed with Traoré," one staffer confided anonymously. "He can't accept that he lost." But the world had moved on. Trump's presidential authority, already fragile, was now irreparably shattered. His calls for retaliation, vague threats of sanctions or tariffs against Burkina Faso, were dismissed by advisors as unfeasible. "The world is watching," warned Sarah Mitchell, his press secretary. Any move against Traoré would backfire spectacularly. Meanwhile, Traoré stood before the World Economic Forum in Davos, delivering the keynote address to a rapt audience of global leaders. "6 months ago, the American president challenged me, expecting an easy victory," he said, his voice clear and resonant. He learned that underestimating someone based on their age or nation is a grave mistake. The room erupted in applause, a 5-minute standing ovation from CEOs, prime ministers, and presidents, an honor unprecedented for an African leader at Davos. "Leadership," Traoré continued, "is not about intimidation or bluster. It is about preparation, integrity, and respect for truth." The accolades poured in. Time magazine named Traoré Person of the Year, declaring, "Traoré has redefined global diplomacy, proving that wisdom transcends borders and dignity outshines arrogance." Harvard offered him a visiting professorship. Oxford established the Traoré Institute for Ethical Leadership. The Sorbonne renamed its main lecture hall in his honor. Traoré, while flattered, remained focused on his mission. "These honors belong to Africa," he told his team. "They show the world what we're capable of." Back in America, the fallout intensified. A Republican strategist, speaking off the record, called the debate the final nail in Trump's coffin. "We can't keep defending this chaos." Polls showed Trump's approval rating plummeting to historic lows, with even his base fractured. "I love Trump, but he looked weak," admitted a longtime supporter at a rally. "That African guy, I made him look small." In a striking turn, American officials began quietly seeking advice from Burkina Faso. "We want to understand the Traoré model," admitted Acting Secretary of State Laura Bennett during a discreet call with Dr. Conate. "How does a small nation produce a leader who commands such global respect?" Traoré, ever gracious, responded through his foreign minister, "America is a great nation. The issue isn't its people, but leaders who confuse power with authority. True authority comes from serving others, not dominating them." A year after the debate, Ibrahim Traoré received the Nobel Peace Prize for redefining international diplomacy through dignified leadership. In his acceptance speech, he reflected on the moment that changed everything. "President Trump gave me an extraordinary gift," he said, his voice steady but warm. "A platform to show that Africa deserves respect, not condescension. Thank you, Donald, for underestimating me so completely." The audience rose in applause, the words resonating as a testament to his grace and strength. Trump, by contrast, was a shadow of his former self. Facing mounting legal battles and a party eager to move on, he retreated further into Mar-a-Lago, his public appearances rare and subdued. The Traoré meltdown broke him, a former aide observed. He thought he could bully his way through anything, but he met someone who didn't flinch. Traoré's influence continued to grow. He brokered regional trade agreements in Africa, strengthening economic ties and reducing dependency on foreign aid. His speeches at the United Nations and G20 summits drew standing ovations, with leaders citing his clarity and moral courage. Burkina Faso, once overlooked, became a model for governance, with its universal healthcare and education reforms studied by nations worldwide. In a final irony, American universities began teaching the debate as a case study in leadership. Traoré versus Trump appeared in political science curricula, dissecting the dangers of hubris and the power of preparation. Ibrahim Traoré did what no American opponent could, a Yale professor noted. He exposed Trump's fragility not with insults, but with facts and dignity. As Traoré stood on the balcony of the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, looking out over a city alive with pride, he reflected on the journey. "We didn't just win a debate," he told Dr. Conate. "We showed the world that leadership isn't about where you're from, it's about what you stand for." Across the Atlantic, Trump's legacy was reduced to a cautionary tale. The man who had sought to humiliate a young African leader had instead elevated him to global reverence, while his own presidency crumbled under the weight of his hubris. The world had watched a clash of leadership and chosen its victor.